Okay. I'd like to call to order the May 10th, 2022 City Commission work session. Mr. Wiley, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Morrow.
Here.
And Commission President Denise McGriff.
Present. So I'm glad everybody came back. Thank you for coming back. You might have had some escapees. All right, so we have on our agenda, we have future work items. Mr. Conkle, please.
So before you, we have what we plan to bring forward. We are trying to identify some of these that if we don't have an Urban Renewal Commission beforehand, we'll try to bring forward. So example, June 1st, we're going to bring back the parking study results as an update associated with that. We've got the Natural Resources Committee's updates on the street tree list, Entrepreneurial Micro Loan Program, Oregon City 2040, Draft Comprehensive Plan. So that will really be the entire document, since we did all that work at the last work session going through the line items. This will be the entire document to have a look at. And I believe on the 7th as well, we since this came out, we added potentially a discussion about the child care program that Mr. Graham has been working on with numerous employers throughout the city. So that looks like for June.
Where, I know that's not at a work session, but when is the heritage tree coming to the commission? Heritage trees that are being considered by PAC, by Natural Resources.
I'll have to get back to you. I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay. Questions, gentlemen, about the work session items? All right, and I guess what's not on here, because it wasn't on our original list, but we have a work session coming up with the city of West Lynn.
Correct.
That is May 6th.
26th.
26th, sorry, not 6, something else is happening on the 16th, so.
Is that to talk about bridge stuff?
It is to talk about bridge stuff.
And we're meeting in West Lynn.
At West Lynn.
Yes, we're meeting in West Lynn. Didn't we host them before, and now they're hosting us, so.
Oh, yay.
Oh, yeah. So, all right. On to the next item, which is the City Commission 2021-2023 goals update.
Thank you. Evening, commissioners. So I'm just going to kind of hit some of the highlights that I think as to where we're at with the goals. And then, if there are specific questions, we can revisit those if that is how you'd like to work through this, unless you'd rather just have discussions about the status or the where we're at on certain goals.
Can you put that up on screen? I have the microscopic version on my pad here, but so go ahead. So the ones in red, I presume we've checked those off.
Not necessarily. I think the only one that we've officially completed with a little caveat was the SDC and utility rate review that Mr. Lewis brought forward. And then we were directed to, once the legislature finishes their rate impact study, that we would bring the legislative findings back as an update to the commission. But Mr. Lewis's work is done. You want me to just do a quick on each one, or? Yeah,
I just wanted to be reminded of what they were. I vaguely remember us talking about what the legislature is doing. Was this SDC study having to do with affordable housing? Is that what that one is about? I mean, there's so many bills. I just can't keep track of them all.
It was looking at SDCs and utility rates related to affordability, I believe, summarizing at a very high level.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it had something to do with affordable housing. Okay. All right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So the first goal is dealing with a comprehensive internal and external diversity, equity, and inclusion framework. And there were 3 strategies of that, creating a community task force to guide external DEI work, as well as evaluate internal policies and procedures to reduce barriers. So we did hire, as you're aware, MGT. We've been working with them, meeting with them regularly. We've provided them our policies. They're beginning a best practices review of that from an internal side. We're also setting up an internal staff stakeholder group, and we're creating a community task force right now. So far, we've received 9 applications. We're hoping to kick that community task force off in June.
How many seats are on that task force?
It's gonna depend on how many folks we have that are interested.
Okay,
Probably anywhere from 15 to 25 is what we're hoping.
okay.
right.
I nominated a couple of people, including a student, an 8th grader, who's very interested in this.
Right. The next goal 2.1, prioritize projects in the Transportation System Master Plan. So we've entered into a contract with DKS and Associates. We're working on the scope review related to that. And really the goal is going to be to review our transportation system plan and the project lists in there. You may recall this was dealing with pedestrian and bike safety, pedestrian crossings, infill of sidewalks throughout our community. So this has been introduced to the Transportation Advisory Committee. So we'll be moving forward with that project and trying to identify how do we recategorize or decide which projects are going to move forward that are related to improving safety and connectivity in our community based on the transportation system plan projects that we have. The next one is complete an analysis to identify deferred maintenance of parks. So that deferred maintenance plan was completed, and this relates to goal strategy 2.5, which I'll talk about in a second, the Parks Master Plan update. So essentially, we took the results from the deferred maintenance plan, and then that's informing the Parks Master Plan that we're currently in process of beginning that project to be able to update our Parks Master Plan. And then once we finish the Parks Master Plan, then we'll start looking at the system development charges necessary to implement that plan and what those may be. So 2.2, the deferred maintenance component of it is completed. Now it's being incorporated into the master plan. 2.3, review SDCs and utility rates. We just talked about that one as completed. The IT strategic plan implementation. This has a lot of components to it. The highlights have been citywide, as well as boards and committees, security training and testing. So those are some of those emails that you'll see asking you to go through the tutorials about different types of phishing scams and whatnot that we see, cybersecurity breaches. We've updated the city's disaster recovery and backup system, and we've performed a recovery test of that. So essentially, if our servers were to be taken down, we can recover all those files and restore them. So they were able to successfully complete that test. We're also beginning the website refresh. That was one of the directives of the commission during the budget, was to redo the city's website. And then we're going to be beginning the recruitment for a new IT director, which was approved as part of the last budget. The next one is complete the Parks Master Plan and update system development charges. So I talked about that a little bit. So the contract for that Parks Master Plan update was approved on April 6th of this year. So we'll be beginning that public engagement process to update our Parks and Rec Master Plan.
So before you move on, so what I'm hoping doesn't happen is that the community by participating in the Clackamas Park thing, that they don't get confused and say, oh, well, we already participated. So I'm assuming that's just going to get rolled into this, to the overall.
The Clackamas Park Plan?
Yeah.
Yes. The next one is strategy 2.6, assess the communication infrastructure and equipment. So you may recall we entered into a contract with Magellan Advisors to do a fiber optics study throughout the city. So right now you'll see we have a survey out. Really, it's trying to identify what are the assets that we have in the city as it relates to the ability to provide fiber, as well as working with Clackamas County to understand what fiber they have available and how that can be utilized. And so really we're in a public information survey and putting together all the background data as to what our assets are related to being able to provide fiber in some type of a public-private partnership. Strategy 3.1, refine and improve the engagement strategy. We did create entered into a contract with a organization that does public engagement, and it's called Bang the Table. This is an interactive ability to utilize social media through our website to get information back from our community. The engagement URL that we're going to spin up is myoregoncity.org. So that would be the URL utilized and tied into our website to be able to get this survey information back. And we're currently now training the staff members throughout the multiple departments that would be able to utilize this public engagement tool.
So where's the option in this process for people that don't utilize that type of communication?
This is really focused on web-based public outreach. So we'll have to look at different alternatives to get additional feedback, but really this was focusing on how can we utilize this tool along with our website update through online platforms.
As long as we don't forget about that other, the people who are not online, there's got to be some platform that we can help them utilize things too. I mean, I know it's interesting. I just talked to some neighbors and they were all over the media and they have just kind of checked out on it. They don't want to deal with it anymore, but if something comes in their mail, they said that they will respond to that. I just asked them, I said, well, they just said it's just too much. I said, okay.
Okay, thank you. Next goal, strategy 4.1, formulate our internal strategy to address homelessness. So the commission recently adopted the homeless strategy brought forward by Chief Band. So this one is primarily done. Now we'll be continuing to push the information out into the community from a public engagement standpoint as to what our strategy is and what those resources are. And this really does dovetail into 4.2, which is develop partnerships with other local and regional governments. So we continue to meet regularly with county, other local jurisdictions, nonprofits, and trying to coordinate and streamline how the resources to address homelessness, substance abuse, mental health issues, housing are being addressed. So that'll be an ongoing project that we continue to work on. 5.1 is a city economic development strategy. The economic development website has been launched. We're currently working on with local employers to design a child care program as well as a local bank to design the entrepreneurial small business loan program. That'll be coming to the commission in June for a work session to review and discuss those. There was several things that have been happening related to the citywide economic development strategy, but I thought those were the highlights of things that are coming before you here in the near future. 5.2 is implementation of the urban renewal study. So we have our next retreat scheduled for May 16th, so next Monday, and you're well aware of where we're at in that process of identifying the vision, how we're going to process applications, approval criteria. At that meeting on the 16th, we're really hoping to focus on, we took all the projects that have been identified in the existing urban renewal plan. We had the costs associated with them when the plan was adopted. We've applied the construction index since it was adopted so that we have new numbers based on construction CPI through these years. And then we've broken it down into the three categories that the Urban Renewal Commission had identified, really trying to identify, public projects, infrastructure projects, public-private partnerships. So on the 16th, we'll really be diving into those projects and starting to provide some guidance to staff on what we want to try to accomplish through that plan. Next would be implementation of the tourism strategy. So the tourism stakeholder groups meetings continue to happen. Meeting with reenactment actors, poets, and singers. Recruitment of paid interns to assist historical sites to try to get them open on a more consistent basis. So trying to build capacity through that intern program. And then creating an Oregon City travel and visitors guide. So that continues to be multiple aspects of the tourism that continues to move forward. 5.4 is supporting, determine the city's role in supporting community events. There are multiple departments working to create program guidelines, essentially trying to streamline the larger community events that don't happen very often. So we've kind of we have a community event where there's something in a shelter, something smaller. This is really trying to identify how are we going to address those larger events, such as a First City celebration where you have multiple street closures for a length of the day, or those larger events, because what we've heard is that the permitting process is fractured. And so how can we identify who needs to be involved in that and what needs to happen in order to get someone through that process smoother? So we will be bringing that back. We'll be meeting with the Oregon City Tourism Network and to develop a draft for city-sponsored events, trying to identify what those might be through that process. So that would be something as well that we're working on to try to complete, to create this more sustainable and consistent community event opportunity here in the community.
Ask a question. I was hoping that before this new permitting process went out for events, that they would have kind of, I guess, guinea pigged it or road tested with some of the possible people that would be affected by it so that they could give a critique, because I think feedback is warranted. If our staff has never put on an event, I mean, you're one of the few people here that was involved when we created the First City celebration back in the day, and you have an idea of what went into that. There's not that many staff that are here that went through that process to understand all the, the components. And so to just throw out a permit at this point in time to say, here it is, without it being sort of given to people saying, you have any suggestions? I just hope that feedback has happened. I'm not sure that it did, but if it hasn't happened, I would like to strongly suggest that happen, so that there isn't, so that it can be, any little glitches could be fixed with it. I've never filled a form out, but I mean, I obviously participated with you in the First City Festivals when I worked at the city. So I know that there was a lot going on there. The question I had mostly is about 5.1. We were presented with the economic development strategy, but there was never any follow-up with us as to whether we were going to be anointing it, blessing it, approving it. And when I asked the question, I got a lot of pushback on our ability to basically own it. So I don't know where that conversation went, but I know that some of us felt very strongly about what we saw and what we didn't see. I have some nodding going on here.
I just totally agree with everything you said. As I look through these goals, those goal fives caused me a lot of concern, not only with accomplishing them, but accomplishing them in a timely manner. I mean, we're in the middle of May now. We talked, and I don't want to get into specifics, but things that would make us immediately successful: commonality of ticking, commonality of operating hours. We're off on a path where it seems like there's this direction about daycare, and I'm not sure how much direction that was given by others. I mean, it seems like a pet of the director, but that particular section, the economic development strategy and the tourism strategy, they need a lot of immediate attention. Because we're entering the season and we're not prepared to deliver goods. My thoughts on that. And I agree with your summary of our feeling about what was presented to us. It just didn't leave you fulfilled like you knew what you needed to know.
And And on the economic development strategy, I asked specifically who represented tourism. There's no one that represented tourism on that development strategy at all. And that concerns me.
Well, we were told it was the chamber, but that's
It's not.
The chamber, yeah.
The chamber doesn't do tourism.
No, they don't. So, okay, well, we can, go ahead, please.
Well, I'd just like to say, and I wasn't here for the goal-setting part, and I know that from my first meeting with James, and they were talking to me about the whole child care issue. And I think that it's not just a siloed issue. I mean, if we want to have a comprehensive citywide economic development strategy, we need to have the ability for parents to leave their homes and actually go to work. So childcare is inevitably going to be a part of that. And, you know, as you guys know, we're having regional conversations about that at the county level, and I'm excited with where that's going. But, you know, I wouldn't want to get bogged down with this specificity of we didn't directly bless this one issue. I think it's important to remember, if we want to have a workforce, we need to have the ability for them to leave their home and ensure that their child is taken care of.
Well, I don't think we disagree, and obviously, I mentioned earlier about my constraints that I had with coming back to work and finding childcare. So I can only imagine it's gotten exponentially worse over the time, since my child was in childcare. I think the comment involves that this became a priority where we may not have had input into it as we may have liked. I guess that's the way I will describe it.
Well, it was never a commission priority. It has never been a commission priority.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally get it. I understand why it needs to be, but we had some specific questions about it. Not that we were saying we didn't support it.
Right.
We just want to make sure that we are all, again, the entire strategy, I want to make sure that we are on board, that we can we know what's going on with it, and we can, you know, again, I get asked about it a lot, and I will honestly say there's some things that I can't, you know, it's not my expertise, but so I can't speak to all of it. But, you know, I have spoken with several folks in the community about the child care issue, and I know it is a big thing. So we just have to figure out how we can stay a little bit ahead of where our priorities are going and go down that path with staff so that we are comfortable about how that is being rolled out.
If I could say something here, every element in the economic development strategy has been passed by this commission in the budget. And this commission approved every strategy because you gave money to it. Now, it is not a stretch that child care is an important workforce and workforce retention and recruitment tool. Everyone in the whole nation knows that. It is not a stretch that small businesses need help. And it's not a stretch that we need to be more business friendly in this community. So I don't understand exactly what the confusion is, but if this strategic plan has actually already been approved by virtue of approval of a budget, you can't do anything without money anyway. So that's all I have to say about it.
I'm going to respond to that, and I think my fellow commissioners who were involved in the budget process, we didn't have a lot of details when we approved the budget. The details were going to be forthcoming. So please don't take offense if we are now asking you questions. Just because we approved the budget, that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to change our minds or to say, wait a minute, we want to do this instead of that. We didn't have the details. And we're now getting the details, so I'm just asking that we be informed as early as possible about what it is that is going on with those details. Because regardless of whether we approve the budget, the buck is going to stop back up here at this podium, and we're going to be held accountable. So I'm just saying that the budget per se is not the entire trigger.
I agree with all my fellow commissioners. I agree with Commissioner Marl's summation. I think that childcare is a component of a successful economic strategy, but it is not it's not the point of the spear to me. It is a complementary element that will allow other elements to succeed. And I agree with Commissioner Acting Mayor McGriff's comments about review of the budget and that furnishing of details later and our abilities to review them.
Okay, so we'll be reviewing both of that and the entrepreneurial program in June, at the June work session.
Number 6.
Let's see, where were we? Update our code to provide additional housing opportunities. So this is House Bill 2001. You've completed your first reading. I don't think I need to really add anything additional to that one. 7.1, determine and establish a relationship with the tribes that have a shared history with Oregon City. And one of the main projects under this was the Cayuse 5 Memorial with the Umatilla tribe. So we continue to work with Umatilla and Confederate Tribes of the Grand Ronde on identifying the location that would be associated with that project. So those discussions are ongoing. 7.2, enhance partnerships with agencies and organizations to promote Oregon City's resources, opportunities, and events. Some of this was focused around the Workforce Development Initiative, so working with Clackamas Community College, Oregon State University, the Oregon Employment Department, Clackamas Workforce, Oregon City School District, really trying to figure out how we can streamline how the workforce development process happens. It's very fragmented and siloed, so how do we get all those organizations that are providing that workforce development opportunities, training, educational opportunities, all working and rowing in the same direction. Others examples would be our collaboration with West Lynn for the 100-year celebration, as well as some of the banks and employers that we've been reaching out to on the economic development side associated with our entrepreneurial program and the child care component. 7.3 is promote the arts as a focus of community identity. So the Arts Commission was reestablished back in October of last year.
Yay!
They were able to have 2 retreats to develop their vision and goals to support arts in the community. And they met with art groups and how do they engage and become a component of tourism, and how does tourism support arts, and how does arts support tourism? So those conversations and strategies are still in process.
I understand they've approved our first mural under the new code, which is exciting.
Yep. Did get the mural code going? Yes.
To what extent is music a part of the Arts Commission's
It is.
purview?
It is, yep.
Okay.
That was one of the stakeholders I might not have said that they were reaching out to earlier on, but yeah, music is a component of that.
Okay.
I know something else that I was asked a question about had to do with, I know that on our Malala Streetscape project, we allocated and carved out some money for art, but we don't really have a formal program like they do in Portland, 1% for art. I know we've been doing it, but I'm just wondering if, I know that that's something they've been talking about, and I think that we have been doing it. We've set a good example, but I think we should formalize it, and I think that's kind of where they're going, so that we can say on different projects, whether it's public or private, there's going to be some allocation for that. And unfortunately, over the last few months, we've lost a few of our art pieces to wayward cars coming off the, like if you don't like my driving, stay off the sidewalk type issues. So some of those things, we had a little, a fund somewhere. I know insurance is going to cover some of it, but we need to look at how we're replacing those things. And I know that we would all be very supportive of that, and it's a part of a livability sort of thing with our community. So yay for them.
And then strategy 7.4, use art to attract, engage community members and visitors. So this really does tie into the previous strategy as well. Arts Commission's working to create a strategic plan as well as initial discussions about creating an art incubator and what that might look like to try to create that environment for those creative arts, whether in many forms. That's the updates that I have for tonight. Related to the
Fantastic.
goals.
We're making really good progress, I think. Don't you guys think we are? Okay, good. All right. All right. Sidewalk Replacement Assistance Grant Program. And I know that our Public Works Director is out of the country, but, you know, if he was somewhere, we could say, John, I hope you're tuning in somewhere. John, if you listen to this meeting.
He turned down the international calling thing I offered him.
Did he? Oh, I'm shocked by that. I'm absolutely shocked that he would turn that down. I would not think he would want to miss this, since this is his pet project. So tonight we are fortunate to have our Assistant City Engineer, Josh Wheeler, here to try to fill the big shoes of John Lewis.
No one can fill those shoes.
I think you're right.
Okay, so thank you for having us tonight. This presentation, I'll provide the presentation. Feel free to stop me at any time. Christina Robertson-Gartner is here to also speak about anything from a tree perspective. So we're both here for you tonight.
You want to come up and keep Josh company, or hold hands, or kumbaya?
Presentation, I'll be here.
Okay. Just didn't want him to feel like he was lonely.
Thanks. So this is what we're going to go over tonight. We're providing you with an overview of the sidewalk and tree programs from April 30th, 2018 to May 10th, 2022. Why April 30th? That's the day I started with the city. And so I'm giving you my perspective on how these programs have worked since I've been at the city in Public Works. And so we're first going to talk about sidewalk repair, which is managed by the engineering department within Public Works. And then we'll talk about the tree removal replacement permitting program that has existed in the planning department. We'll then move on to the sidewalk replacement assistance program, which is led by engineering and has assistance from planning. And then we'll talk about the grant program process, and then the challenges and adjustments that we've had during the last few months in implementing that program, and then some time for questions at the end and next steps if there are any. So firstly, with the sidewalk repair program, this has existed for several years, way beyond before I got here. City code has two different sections in it, one stating that the owner of the land abutting a sidewalk is responsible for the maintenance, and one saying that no work in the right-of-way is allowed without the proper permit. And so for those that need to repair their sidewalk, they need to come to the city and get a permit to do that work. And this is a very common city code in all of the metro area. Most of the cities around us have that sort of code. So on the right side of the slide, you'll see a copy of the first page of the right-of-way permit application. For the sidewalk repairs, it's a one-page application with front and back. The front is the items that the applicant fills out. The back is the section of terms that they follow during the permit. A permit requires a licensed contractor unless the work is self-performed. It requires a site plan, and quite often staff assists to help the applicants prepare that. And it requires a permit fee, and for regular permits, that's $176 as of today. And for ones that are part of that grant program, it's $88. Back in 2019, previous city engineer, Alita Froman Goodrich, as well as the staff that were involved at the time, myself, Dana, and others, we were seeing people on a similar block get permits and said, why can't we provide a discount to those that are trying to do the work together? We felt this encouraged neighbors to work together. We also felt it helped our pedestrian access ways get improved more quickly with the amount of trip hazards that occur on public sidewalks. And this would give a small discount to people to work together on that. And so group permits are for those properties on the same block with the same contractor. It's really only beneficial from a financial standpoint if there's 3 or more properties involved. It's a one-page right-of-way permit. It's the same application. It again requires that licensed contractor, and the permit fee is double the amount because of the amount of people involved. And so instead of $176 for an individual, it's $352. And that's why 3 or more, it would be advantageous, because 2, it's just $176 a person, basically. But 3, you start getting that discount. So the more people, the more discount occurs. Group permits are with one applicant who is acting for all of the different people doing the work. So there's only one application involved. The process for sidewalk repair, it quite often occurs over the counter. Typically takes around less than 30 minutes, anywhere from 15 to 30. Application is filled out by the applicant. The applicant is either the property owner or the contractor, about 50-50. The fee is paid by the applicant. Staff reviews the application, collects the fee, issues the permit, and staff provides construction details that the contractor should follow, such as what the sidewalk needs to be made of, the width of it, the thickness of it. That's all in our construction details. Staff verifies that the contractor is licensed so that it's not someone doing potentially poor work. And repairs occur for usually 2 reasons. Either code enforcement has been called out due to a complaint, and after code enforcement, we go look at the complaint and determine if it's a trip hazard. I'll talk about trip hazards in a second. If it is a trip hazard, then we help the applicant or the property owner how to process through to get a permit and have work done. The other way that it occurs is it's self-directed. Someone sees their sidewalk, knows it's their responsibility, comes to us and says, we'd like to fix our sidewalk. I would say probably 75% of the time, code enforcement is where most of these permits start. Also, I say at the very end here, in some cases, the property owner or the contractor seeks construction advice from us and requests a site visit. That happens prior to permit. Quite often they'll say, hey, code enforcement called us, or hey, we want to work on our sidewalk. Could you come tell us what our options are? And we send an inspector out, and the inspector speaks with them and shows them the different options they have, from replacement to grinding, which we'll talk about those options in a second.
So Josh, those things you just enumerated, that is what the citizen gets in exchange for his permit fee. All those things that you listed and just stated.
Absolutely. We provide all of that assistance.
Okay, and we go there and we look at the site, we look at the condition of it.
When it's requested.
When requested.
Yep. Some people just know that I want to do this, I know the process, I want a permit, here you go. Other people ask us to come out and give them advice, and so that's where we start.
Yeah, I was always curious as to why the photographs evolved as part of the process when I thought we always had someone go on site and evaluate it, but apparently not.
No. Yeah. The only time we do is for code enforcement. We go out to evaluate if it's a code infraction. But for those that aren't, sometimes they just call us up and say, can you help us? Yep. And the pictures are going to come into a different situation that you'll hear later as well. So when construction advice is requested, staff goes out, but we give them the options, which are either grind or replacement. And grinds are allowed when either a grind has not previously been used. Once it's been ground once, it has to be replaced. If the tripping hazard is a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, or if the trip hazard is a 1/2 inch to 1.5 inches, and 50% of more of the sidewalk will remain after the grind. And those are all case-by-case situations. Sometimes the sidewalk is so lifted, the grind isn't going to do anything, and so you can grind to your heart's content, and it's not going to do anything. And so it's usually those minor grinds that are a little more than half, where quite often people, our standard used to be only up to a ½ inch, but we had a lot of people contact us to say, we want to grind more than that, and we think it's possible. And so we said, as long as there's 2 inches left in that sidewalk, then that's reasonable. And the guidance for that is found in our Safe Sidewalks brochure that is available on our website, as well as on the brochure racks. So the only 2 items that we do allow is removal and replacement, which you're seeing on the picture to the right, and grinding, which is the picture in the middle. What you see on the picture on the left is like a sealant. Some people want to use either a grout or a mortar to smooth everything over. Sometimes they want to put a sealant in the crack. They may choose to do that without contacting the city. That's fine, but if they want to ask us to do it and get a permit for the work, we will not allow that, because we have found it does not last and is not really a proper solution. It's an extremely temporary solution, whereas the other solutions are more permanent. And grinding or removal and replacement both require a permit. So let's change from sidewalks and what was going on before the grant program with trees. And again, if you have any questions on this section, I have summarized it and reviewed this with the planning department, but if you have any questions, Christina is here to answer those. So in the city code, we have 2 major areas in chapter 1208. It says the owner of the land abutting a planting strip is responsible for the tree maintenance. And it also says that tree removal mitigation is discussed, and I'm going to go over some of those details. Tree removal is, the priority for tree removal is to replace the tree in the parkway. That's the desired outcome. It's with a minimum 1.5 inch caliper tree, and this is in code, within the right-of-way adjacent to the subject property. However, if that's not possible for numerous reasons, maybe it's due to the location of a mailbox, maybe it's the location of a street light, maybe the proximity to a hydrant, maybe it's the width of the parkway. So many reasons go into why. There are 4 other options listed in code. Yes?
So I just don't want it there, is that a reason?
I'm going to ask Christina to answer
I'm hoping that it is not. I'm hoping that's not a reason that people can use.
So currently, we do require you to replant if there is replanting options available for you on your sidewalk.
Okay.
And that's why in the code, it does say that's the priority. And so I think that's how the implementation has occurred, I would assume. But if that's not an option, then the other 4 options are you can provide an off-site installation within the right-of-way or public property, so someone can work with the city to have it planted elsewhere. Someone can plant trees on their private property within 10 feet of the right-of-way. In those situations, a covenant is required, and I'll mention that in a second. They can also designate existing trees on their private property that currently exist within 10 feet of the property, the right-of-way, excuse me. That also requires the covenant. So anytime a tree is on private property designated, whether it's newly installed or existing, then a covenant is required on the property. And that covenant states that the tree may not be removed without future replacement. And to do that means recording is required, and there's a fee to record a document like that. And that process has existed for a number of years.
So an existing tree can suffice if recorded?
If recorded a covenant, yes. And then the 5th ultimate option.
Do we have a form for that? Mm-hmm. Okay, I thought we
Yes,
did. Okay.
there is a form.
Okay.
Yes. And then the 5th ultimate option is a fee in lieu. And correct me if I'm wrong, Christina, after the priority options of putting it back in the right-of-way somewhere, those other 4 options, there's not a priority list. They can choose from that list of options.
It's really site-specific.
Yeah, it tends to be site-specific in what works for that property.
I want to make sure everybody understands that there's that priority about putting it in the right-of-way adjacent to the subject property. I want to understand Commissioner McGriff's question. If the person doesn't want to put one there, they can go to these other options?
Not as currently written in our code.
they have to do the one.
If there's space, so if you look and there's now, the spacing standards between a street light or a meter, it determined that actually there is not appropriate space that meets our current city requirements, then they do not have to replant. So if they can't meet the spacing standard today, they are not required to replant. But if there is space that meets the spacing standards, they are required to replant.
And one thing I would add to that is the current tree list that the city follows has trees that are anywhere, the Parkway area has to be 3 feet or bigger, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so there's trees for 3 to 4 feet, 4 to 5 feet, and so on. What was spoken about earlier, the Natural Resource Committee is looking at that list and determining what trees belong in those, or should any belong in those. And that will be coming back up for discussion at a future commission meeting.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that people who are in the process of planting can access that list rather than going to the old list where we end up having more problems. So
right now, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Christina, through this, whether it's just a basic tree permit or whether it's part of the grant program, they are allowed to plant at a later date when the planting season is appropriate. Is that correct?
perfect. Yeah.
I think it's on the next slide, but we really want people to plant at the best time, so late fall and early spring. So depending on where you fit into the timeline. So if you applied for a tree permit today, we would put an October 31st tree planting deadline, because the best time to plant the tree in this calendar year now is back to more like October 1st.
Considering all the rain we're having, it's really,
Normally it's not.
I know,
We
normally
wanna
it's
make
not.
sure
Right now, it's
that-
like, okay, go for it because it's raining to beat the band.
We want to make sure people are giving their tree their best chance.
Chance
for
to survival, yeah.
I want to understand the width of the Parkway. Is it 3 feet?
3.
That is the distance between the inside of the curb to the sidewalk?
That is correct. The back of the curb to the edge of sidewalk. That is correct.
Back of the curb,
That is how that's
closest
measured.
to the street? I mean, excuse me, the back of the curb furthest away from the street to that portion of the sidewalk closest to the street?
That is correct.
3 feet.
Yes.
So real quickly, the Natural Resource Committee is coming up with a suggested revised list for the street trees. And so we are really excited to have that, whatever version is adopted, because until that's adopted, we can't use it. So we do look forward to having that June work session to allow to have additional revisions or additional trees removed or added, so we can update that.
I think you should make some exceptions, that if a tree's on that list and it's trees on the current list, that they should be able to use it, because why do we want to throw good money after bad? I know it's not adopted, but, if I had to do a tree right now, I would be looking at the new list.
So I would recommend people wait, because they now are back to the October 31st deadline.
Okay?
But as it is now, we still have the old street
Oh,
tree
yeah,
list.
which is not good, which is not
Okay.
great.
And so here's how someone goes about dealing with a tree removal and replacement. There's an application. It's a 4-page application. It's actually 5 pages, but the 5th page is an example of how to fill out the application and provide a site plan, which personally I find beneficial. But it's a 4-page application. It requires things such as the number of trees proposed for removal. It calculates the number of trees for mitigation, requires pictures of trees being removed. And so that's where the picture concept comes in. You have to state whether a trip hazard exists on a sidewalk or not. It requires mitigation method to be chosen, but it is a no-cost permit to receive. And the picture on the right side is the cover sheet of that permit application. The process, application is submitted. It can be either an email or in person. Staff reviews that application. They ask for revisions if any is necessary. The permit is then issued, and then the tree replanting deadline, as Christina just spoke about, is set for either spring or fall, depending on when the application is submitted, to discourage planting during the winter or the summer. Next up is the grant program. And so the grant program is offered I missed a slide. The grant program was implemented on February 2nd, 2022, approved by the City Commission with a budget of $200,000 for the next calendar year. The main requirements of the program is that a reimbursement is allowed up to $1,500 per site. There's a minimum of 2 bids required, except for lookbacks with work that was done in previous years. Sidewalk removal and replacement and tree removal are eligible reimbursement costs, but sidewalk grinding and tree installation, new trees, are not part of those eligible costs at this time. The permit fees are 50% of the typical fee cost of a right-of-way permit. And that's what we talked about earlier in the beginning slides. So how is the grant program triggered? Well, the grant program is offered in one of 2 ways. Either applicants that are seeking for a look-back reimbursement, work that was done previous to February 2nd of 2022, or when someone comes in anytime since February 2nd, staff notifies those applicants that this program exists. We've learned in speaking with various members of the public that the look-back program has been found out about or learned about by the public from city news that we posted through Facebook, through the trail news, through our website, and through neighbors. But again, for new permits, for every new permit, we require staff to ask the applicant if a tree is involved. So they come in for a sidewalk permit and we say, was a tree involved? If they say yes, we look on Google Maps for the street view, or we look on OC Maps to see if we can determine that yes, a tree was involved. And if so, then we tell them about the program and say, hey, there's this other option if you would like to take part in it. And that's how someone finds out about the program.
Go out and look at the tree? I'm not a big fan of using Google Maps for everything because it's not 100% accurate.
Sometimes we cannot determine that through Google Maps or OC Maps. And so in those cases, if someone tells us a tree was involved, we do go out and verify. We take their word for it at the counter and tell them we need to go verify that. And so then at that time, we actually do send an inspector back out if they haven't been there before so that we can do a verification. That's just a quick drive-by typically.
Yep, good. Trust but verify. I think that's a good policy.
So how does the program work? Well, Public Works leads the process and starts the process. Public Works staff provides the applicant 4 forms. The right-of-way application form, which they would have needed previously for sidewalk repair. They then get the sidewalk grant program application, a W-9 form, and then they get what was previously provided for the tree removal applications, which would have been the tree removal and replacement permit application. So there's 4 forms involved. Public Works then provides planning with the tree removal replacement application if the applicant fills out everything right there. Quite often someone will come to the counter, they'll fill everything out right there at that time. We take everything in, we let them know if there's anything missing. If they have everything, we then send the document via email to planning so that the customer does not have to do it themselves. Some people choose to take the applications with them, and then they know the city staff or they know process or things like that. They choose to send things directly to planning themselves. It just depends on the various person that comes up. But once things are submitted, the sidewalk plan is reviewed by us, which is actually on the next slide. The planning then reviews the tree permit application, and they determine if that application is fully complete, if they need things like pictures or information on what type of tree they're going to plant, where they're going to plant it, if they haven't provided that information. And once all the information is provided, then they provide a tree removal permit. At that same exact time, Public Works is processing the right-of-way permit to ensure that everything is provided on that permit. But the right-of-way permit is typically, in most cases, not issued until the tree removal permit is issued. And think about it like a building permit. A building permit is not issued until engineering and planning sign off on the various parts of their reviews as well. So very similar, Public Works leads it, but makes sure that planning has done whatever they need on their part to do that. And sometimes they will issue the permit and say we can decide on the tree species later or decide on when you're planting it later. We have flexibility. We work with the applicants on that. The next step, that once permits are issued, contractor completes the work, and once that work is complete, the applicant contacts Public Works for reimbursement. And at that time, the applicant needs to provide the completed grant application, receipts of the work that was completed, and that comes in a lot of different forms. We see it from credit card statements to invoices from a contractor to checking account bills, and we match them up with the bids. So there's a lot of different ways we look at that. A completed W-9 form, and then the evidence that they've shown they tried to get 2 bids. And then for look-backs, it's done a little bit differently. The applicant provides a completed application, receipts of the work that was completed, the W-9 form, and then evidence of an issued right-of-way permit and tree removal permit, and evidence that the applicant was the property owner at the time of the work being done. Quite often that's done with either a tax bill or a utility bill, things like that. The evidence of the right-of-way permit and the tree removal permit, sometimes people have those and provide those to us. Other times they say, do you have that information on file? We go in our permit system, see if we can find it. We bring up their address. If it comes up, great, we have it. If we don't have that, there's not any good way to find it after that because it probably does not exist, but we have been through various iterations of permit systems. But there's the other downside is I had one the other day that they want reimbursement back from the 90s, I think it was. Our file system just doesn't go back that far. And so I did a search, but nothing came up, and I said, you're gonna have to find evidence on your end because we don't have anything here because there's, various requirements on how long you're supposed to keep files. So. Now, group permits is where things get a little tricky. Now you have a sidewalk permit, a tree removal permit, and an application, but now you have multiple people involved, and the complexity definitely increases exponentially. What happens is one applicant applies for the sidewalk permit. Again, sometimes that's a contractor, sometimes it's a representative of a neighborhood. If the applicant is a community member, they're typically in charge of providing the grant application, the W-9 forms to other permittees because they're working with them individually to talk about it. It may include the tree application as well. If they're a contractor, we have offered to send the forms via regular mail to the various applicants that are part of that permit. Currently, we've had 2 different group permits since the program started. 2 different group applications. One of them was for 1 block, and so it was 1 permit. One of them was 3 different blocks, and so we did 3 separate permits. But note, there is no group tree permit, so there's only a group sidewalk permit, which again was implemented back in 2019. So group permits also cause a lot of communication gaps. And the reason I use the image of a phone on the side there is it really is like the game of telephone. Quite often what I've heard over the last few months is, so-and-so told me this, and the game of telephone starts losing the actual rules and regulations of the program over time. And so we're out there to let them know what the program is, what the requirements are. But quite often you see that communication gap between the applicant representative and each applicant, that they're doing their best to help their community, but sometimes you're telling each person the same thing with a few different words and each person hears it differently. Between the applicant and Public Works, each applicant comes to us, and again, we're giving the same message, but one person might use one word and one person might use another word. They're both synonyms, but people hear them differently. And so sometimes that occurs. Between the applicant and planning can occur. What do I need for this tree removal and why do I need pictures? And just between each other, applicants talking to each other. And we've seen that quite often. And so misinformation and a lack of understanding can occur over time, but our goal is to try and keep that from happening. And you're gonna hear how we've tried to do that in the next 2 slides. So what are some of our challenges and how have we made adjustments as we've learned to implement this program since February? One of our first challenges was misinformation in the public sphere. So many people have come to me either at the counter, a phone call, I've talked to them in the field, because I personally have went with some of the inspectors out to listen to the community and hear what their challenges are, what they're looking for. And so what we did, we created a frequently asked questions webpage. And we also created a staff talking points memo that each person has on their own desk, but it's also up at the front counter so that the same message can be given out to everyone and that there's no misunderstandings that way. A second challenge that we had was a communication gap between planning and engineering. So we work really well together 99% of the time. There was a situation during this program where we did have a communication gap, and we saw it because it caused some concern. And so we had a meeting between all permitting staff on both sides, made sure that everyone knew what the other one was doing, what is the right hand doing that the left hand's doing, that sort of thing. And then we also implemented, and I'll give props to John Lewis for this one, he directed us in Public Works to provide the tree application to the applicants going forward. And so that was another way that we thought would be better than saying you need to go to planning for that. And so that was a way to try and streamline that. A third challenge that we've experienced is contractor. We had a contractor for one neighborhood, not the Trailview neighborhood, a different neighborhood, and came to us and said, hey, I've been hired by this HOA to determine what kind of problems they have in their neighborhood. And he had 143 tripping hazards that he had found. Myself and one of the inspectors went out and walked to the site with him to concur that they were tripping hazards, to determine what methods of replacement they could use, whether it was replacement or grinding, so that they knew what their options were. What the downside of 143 tripping hazards is, if those all were replacements and they were all 143 different sites, our budget would be gone with one neighborhood. And so that's why we wanted to make sure we educate people to let them know, if you don't want to replace and you would prefer to grind, those are options. And you're going to hear later, though, that if grinding is an option, but you want to replace, and that's your decision, then you still get to replace anyway. You aren't forced to grind, but many people desire to grind.
So how many of the 143 ended up being after you went?
I didn't count them up. It was about 50-50. I don't know what the actual number is, but it took us 2 hours to do that walk.
But it didn't all qualify, basically?
No, they didn't all.
Okay.
Yeah, and some didn't even qualify for the program. I would say about 60-80% qualified for the program. And about 50 of those were grind if they desired. That group has not come back to us asked for a permit yet.
Okay.
Challenge number 4, some bids came in lower than the bid that was chosen. And why that happened was someone got a bid from this contractor, went and did the work, and we had got a permit, and we were in the transition phase of February, basically. And then they're like, oh, well, I have to get this other bid to be eligible for the program. So they went and get another bid, and it actually became lower than what they actually chose. And so we were in kind of a situation like, what do we do? Because I think the purpose of the 2 bids was we shouldn't be going with the high bid, but it was already chosen, already decided. But we honored that one in that case and didn't make them go with the lower one. But going forward, now when we talk about the program, we let them know ahead of time, hey, if you have a contractor on board now, we recommend you go get another bid just in case, because if it's lower, we have to give you the lower reimbursement. If you haven't got a contractor yet, make sure you get 2 bids. So we're now informing people ahead of time so that they know what the consequences are. Some may choose to say, hey, if it's lower, I don't care, I just want to get it done. Okay, and so that's what we do.
But what you're establishing is the city's liability is only to pay the lower of the 2 bids.
That's correct. And so, I've talked a little bit about grind versus replacement. We've learned a lot that some residents want to grind still. So before the program, I would say most people wanted to grind because it was cheaper. With the program, I would say fewer want to grind. But many of them still do because they actually want to keep their tree. And in those situations, we let them know of the risk they're taking on, that it may rise again. Some residents want to also keep the tree. Some people just want to remove the tree and grind. Some people want to remove the tree, keep the tree and grind, which they can do. And we let them know what the risk they're taking on is.
Josh, are you going to deal with a third possibility, I believe was referred to as bridging? Did you read that?
Excuse me. What bridging is the sidewalk is removed, but they don't want to cut the tree root, and so they pour the concrete over it. That's always been allowed. We let them know, you realize there's a risk there, and you realize that this program is only eligible for this site once. And so in those cases, if the root causes you a problem again, you will not get reimbursed again. And so we do make people aware.
And that's the point I wanted to make clear. It wasn't clear in the paperwork I read that if you choose to leave the tree in place and say you remove the root which has run underneath your sidewalk and lifted it, and all the repairs are made and the tree subsequently dies,
Yep,
it's not eligible for any reimbursement for removal in the future, correct?
that's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're not required to remove the tree root. Some people want to keep the tree and they want to bridge it, that's fine, but it may break again, and if it breaks again, or the tree dies, or any of those things, it's not eligible for a second reimbursement.
Right, that's what I wanted to make clear because it wasn't clear to me when I read it.
And then my last statement is, as I said earlier, residents are given these options. If a grind is allowed, but they desire replacement, then we honor replacement, and then they get the reimbursement in the program. So lastly, here's the data that we have from February 2nd, 2022 to the end of April. We've had 27 applications, which included 62 sites in total. We have paid out around $35,000, but the total possible reimbursements right now is around $93,000. And so, why is there that funding gap? Because a lot of those are ones that are under construction right now, and they don't get the reimbursement until post-construction. So the vast majority are currently under construction. And then we have numerous websites. The first three existed prior to the program: how to do a right-of-way permit, the Safe Sidewalks brochure, how to remove and replace a public street tree. Those websites already existed. The next two on that list are new websites, the first one being the Sidewalk Replacement Assistance Program, and then the second one being the Frequently Asked Questions webpage. And so with that, Christina and I are here for any questions. Your options would be to let the program continue until January of 2023 for the 1-year cycle, determine if renewal and reassessment, where we go from there. Or if there's things that you feel should be improved upon at this point, we'd like to hear what those revisions would be, and we could bring back a new program to adopt as soon as June.
Madam Chair, a question.
Yes, sir, Bob.
You indicated you were going to speak about this recording or the covenants, and we didn't hear anything on that. That came as a surprise, along with an associated cost. I was drilling down in the literature I was sent, and the link to explain that took me to a dead end.
So that, I may not have highlighted it well. The tree code 1208, when it has those other options in there, so I'll go back to that slide.
Well, mainly the costs associated with it, and where is it accomplished? Is that a recording against a deed would be at the county, would it not?
Yes.
Yeah, so right now,
It's the county's
the city code states that if you're planting the tree on private property or designating one of your trees on private property, the city code says you must record a covenant on there, and then that covenant just is the cost that it takes to record.
Can they apply for reimbursement for that as part of the program?
That is not part of the program currently.
Here's a legal question you may not be able to answer. Could we declare an emergency and waive that fee for the purposes of this program?
We have spoken to the city attorney, assistant city attorney about that, Carrie Richter, and she said that would not be legally possible. And she said the only way to make that possible would be to change city code.
The reason I asked, I've seen the emergency thing invoked so many times when I questioned if it was an emergency. So now I have a trip hazard where I think it is an emergency, and I was choosing to try to invoke it. So that's her opinion. And we,
I have a clarifying.
well, that's a county fee, though.
Right.
Yeah, I have a
It's
clarifying
we
question.
can't waive a county fee.
I understand.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, right now our code, if you want to choose one of those two options, you have to sign a covenant. And so I think that's a code change to take that away. The other option that was brought up, I think, Ms. Hart-Ravitch, would be a potential reduction in the fee in lieu for tree mitigation if you're taking part in the tree program. And that would just be a new fee that the city commission would want to pursue. But the covenant is in our municipal code, and so that would have to be a legislative code change, because we can't, or it would be a reimbursement of a county fee. So I don't know how exactly that works for city funds.
I don't either, so I'm just going to read this, so it's what I remembered it was since when I did my recording. So the fee to record the first page of a deed or mortgage document is $93. It wouldn't be more than one page, but it says plus $5 for each additional page, and that's at the Clackamas County Recorder's office. So that's what it costs in addition to that. So if you will indulge me,
Certainly.
Gentlemen, Tom, could you come up and give like a 2-minute your comment about that?
2 minutes, start the
Yes,
timer.
I'm giving them 2 minutes.
Well, first off, just let me say thanks to all of you and to Josh and John. They really have done a good job.
So don't
It really
forget your
helps us
name,
a lot.
even though it's not a public hearing.
Tom Guile.
Yep.
Oregon City.
Yep.
Passed. Really, they did a great job. We didn't realize what we were totally getting into until they started to lay the forms for the cement, how much those roots had really gone down. We thought we didn't have any roots. We'd grind into the stumps, and man, the roots were wrapped around the fire hydrant, and we couldn't take them out. But let me talk about the deed. The situation is, these trees that the four of us are dealing with were within 3 feet, some of them 2 feet, of the water utility box. So according to code, we can't put it in there within 5 feet. So our question is, if they were illegally put in and they weren't inspected in the beginning, why should we have to do a deed now to put a tree somewhere when it shouldn't have been there in the first place? We love trees. We're replacing all the trees that are legal, but I would rather put it right next to my driveway rather than pay another fee for it. But it would still, that's the utility box, and as I said, once wrapped around a fire hydrant, they're disrupting the fire or the utility water box. So why should any of us have to pay and do a deed for a tree that shouldn't have been there in the first place? And the second part of that, we live in an HOA, so we already have covenants and restrictions on our deeds for our homes, and this would be a second one. Imagine going to sell your house and somebody signing in, they have to sign for all these deeds. But again, my main thing is the tree wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. It wasn't inspected when it was put in. Why should we have to pay for a deed not to put it there? I have 17 trees already in my front yard, which they agreed. Deliana told me I could put one of those as a deed, but again, why do a deed for trees that were part of my landscape but shouldn't have belonged there in the first place? And that's what four of us are facing.
I think that's a question that we need to forward on to our city attorney, because I don't disagree with your premise. The tree shouldn't have been there in the first place, and it caused a problem, I think, in a way that we are a little bit responsible.
Yes.
As the city. But let's see what Ms. Richter or Mr. Gebeisman has to say about
Okay.
that. I think this is a very specific situation.
Yeah. Again, it was a rough start, and I guess we were considered the test case. There were 7 of us under my group, but it was rough, and I gave Josh a hard time, and he came out and spent a lot of time with us, going around, walking around the sidewalks. He and John, I really appreciate you all for all the things you did, and thank you, Commission.
So we have one parking lot issue to ask the attorneys.
So I'm just trying to remember, and I couldn't find it quickly in the staff report. Was it 200,000 that we initially allocated for this?
Yes.
Okay, so we're with the 35,000 and then the soon-to-be 93,000, we're at around just over 60% of the funds being allocated.
Well, then, the 35 is part of the 93. So
Oh,
we've paid
okay.
out 35 of the 93 requested.
Oh, perfect, okay.
So we're about halfway there.
Okay,
So it's 200,000 minus 93, okay?
Correct.
And again, it was a trial program,
Right.
correct?
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I don't have any problem with us looking at the first option, which is letting it go to the date that we specified, and obviously you guys are going to be tweaking it along the way, because something else is going to come up that we didn't anticipate, and that's okay. I appreciate the fact that the staff has been very willing to make those adjustments, because, again, we're doing something that we've never done before. It's a trial and error. It's not perfect, and I hope that the public understands that. We were, as Mr. O'Donnell will say, no good deed goes unpunished, and so we've tried to do this to the best of our ability, but there's tweaks along the way. Anybody else have any objection to us letting this continue? It's 2023, we said 2023?
Yes, the program runs from February 1st, 2022 to January 31st, 2023. So we would be back in either December or January
Okay.
to ask what's next.
Are we providing any guidance as to where to purchase trees cost effectively, or?
I don't know. I know there's lots of nurseries around and everybody is trying to find trees, I can tell you that. Friends of Trees has had problems finding trees.
Well, this is a unique year. In the last 2 years have been a unique year. Sorry about this. We have not provided any direction. When I think about Clackamas County, there are a lot of nurseries, and as far as I've heard, in general, people are always able to reach out to the nurseries stock that they know and move forward. So we have not provided a list previously. Though I know Pete Walter, our previous planner, did provide some links to some state programs and state connections, but not necessarily individual private nurseries.
I was just trying to go the extra mile, always searching for the deal that if you participate with us, Mr. Nursery Guy, you offer our purchasers from our city under this program a discount. You want to do that? Of course you don't. Do I want to do it? Yeah, I'd like to see it.
I have a question and I think a request. So one of the issues that one of the terms that we use in this is that in order for a tree to be removed, we've talked about getting the opinion of an arborist. So what is our standard for having an arborist? I'm assuming if you are calling yourself an arborist, you are licensed and certified.
Yeah, we look for the certified license.
So one of my concerns is we have certified arborists or arborists who are out there who also are doing the removal of the tree. And to me, that seems like a conflict. I haven't seen one yet that's come through that the arborist said, no, don't remove it, that wasn't affiliated with some tree company. And am I the only one seeing that? It just seems like there's a conflict. They automatically say, oh yeah, it should be taken out.
I think my two answers would be, we'd have to amend the code, but one thing the city could look at if they want to provide a third-party arborist that someone pays into. That's something we could look up as an option, but on city staff level, we're really looking, is this a certified arborist? And have they provided the information needed to meet the code?
Well, I know, but I just went through one, 3 times it came back. And one time the arborist said X, they said Y, they said Z, which made me uncomfortable because, again, they have the ability to gain by taking the tree out, by saying that it's whatever they're saying that's a problem. And I see there a conflict.
Well, that goes back to John Lewis's emphasis on the desire of a city arborist, right?
A city, forester.
Yeah, city forester. Yeah.
We're working on it. He's working on it.
But as far as this program is concerned, is that a concern? You can have a perfectly healthy tree that's lifting the sidewalk and it needs to come out.
A perfectly healthy tree can lift a sidewalk.
That's what
Yes,
I'm saying, and it needs to come out.
In those situations, an arborist is not required.
Right, that's the point.
Yeah, I just hope we have a little more specificity about the lift. I will say this from my own personal experience. I was cited for a tree lift. It turned out that the lift area was within the city's public right-of-way of an alley, which was not on my property, and the city chose to grind it. They came out 2 days later, ground it down. It has not been a problem, but it is within, it's within the 10-foot alley. And because I had surveyed my property, I told the inspector, there's the pin, here's the other pin, this is not my responsibility. So I will say that the city has taken the grind option themselves because it was warranted. It has not lifted since then. I watch it on a regular basis when I'm doing my yard work, so that's a case where that worked. And the tree, which is not anywhere near the right-of-way, it's 10 feet above the sidewalk, is still there, dropping lovely maple leaves on my yard, but that's okay. It's still there. All right, gentlemen, anything else on this?
No.
All right, so you've got consensus. We're going to keep rolling down the road, and please, make adjustments as you need to, because something else is going to come up, and we'll talk to Ms. Richter or Mr. Kweisman about the issue with the covenant, double covenant. So I do know that you can take one of your 17 trees, regardless of what happens, and designate that as or maybe you're going to designate all 17 of them as your replacement.
Put one in the middle of my parking lot.
Yeah, well, no, but you've got 17 trees on your property. One of them's got to suffice. All right, thank you very much. Thank you for the excellent presentation and the information. We appreciate it.
Good job, Mr. Wheeler.
Yes. Mr. Lewis, we'll take that as a good example. All right, Mr. Conkle, we're down to the last item, which is City Manager's report.
I don't have a report, I guess, thank you for forwarding. I sent you an email this afternoon. A couple of commissioners forwarded some social media posts about what we're looking at in terms of implementing fees equitably across our parks. I have Mr. Reed here. If you'd like a brief summary, or if you have specific questions that we can answer related to that.
I thought the memo was fairly self-explanatory. Do any of you have questions about it?
The park fees?
Yeah, it was a memo. I don't know if you saw it, but
I haven't read it yet.
I haven't seen it.
yeah. So I know that I was told that one of the things that is occurring is that Parks and staff is reaching out to these different groups because there's going to be some additional consideration given for their donations to the city park that they're taking care of, baseball, pickleball, whatever it is. So he's indicated that that's happening. I think that some of these groups probably jumped the gun on being a little bit upset about things without stepping back a minute and checking, because I know that many members of PRAC are part of some of these groups, and they were involved in this cost recovery way before we saw it. So I don't know, Kendall, unless you have something else you want to add. Did I characterize that correctly?
I think the important thing is that we are not charging people to use a playground. We are not charging the general public when a pickleball court is not exclusively reserved for a private organization to use a pickleball court, nor a basketball court, nor to walk on a path. This is organizations that collect fees that exclusively reserve our baseball fields, soccer fields, pickleball courts to the exclusion of the general public. And this is where we've looked at the cost recovery component that was gone through PRAC, came to the city commission on, what do we subsidize and what do we charge a fee for related to the public benefit associated with it. So we're not looking to charge to walk on our park paths. This is truly about you are reserving a pickleball court or a baseball field to the exclusion of the rest of the general public of Oregon City unless you are a member of that organization.
Right, so the thing I was bringing up was that we have had many organizations who have done maintenance, And what it was indicated to me was that we were going to take that into consideration because they are providing us a service. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear on the record, that there's going to be discussion with those groups about how to, what's the word I want? Even it out, I guess, so to speak, because that there is value in what they've been doing. Go ahead.
That was my same exact comment regarding the special events at the parks. Same thing. And that's one of the reasons I question why we went from not having a different rate for nonprofits versus for-profit. I know it disappeared. I have a feeling it disappeared on the 2-year gap I was off the commission. I have no rationalization for that. I'd like to hear more about how we got there, and I'd like to revisit it.
We're not going to revisit it tonight, though.
No.
Is Kristen doing anything to help clarify communications-wise what's going on here?
Yes, we've updated our website, and then we also are utilizing this statement when we get calls or emails related to this subject.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to, do we have any committee reports, commission committee reports?
None from me.
Okay. I wanted, none from you? One, please go ahead.
So we did have a tourism stakeholders meeting on April 19th, and it was kind of a, I won't say restart, but it was a good, well, it was a meeting at City Hall. There was probably 10, 15 people were there from the tourism stakeholders group. It was a presentation by our economic development director and also our tourism program specialist, Daniel Gehring, who this was really his first tourism stakeholders meeting to introduce himself and give a little viewpoint of where we're at. So it was kind of revisiting and refocusing where we've been and where we're going. So I felt it was a good meeting. I felt there was some good discussion there. And so it was a general presentation of some of the things that have been happening over the last few months, what we're doing over the summer into the new year. The special, or so I don't want to say special event, we haven't decided on what it's going to be called, but this whole process of signature events or sponsored events for the city, that was talked about a little bit. So a good meeting, and but it was more of a presentation and a refresh and get ready to kind of move forward than it was a full meeting.
Yeah.
But it went well.
I will say in response to something that Commissioner O'Donnell mentioned about getting ready this summer, I think there's a consensus among the tourism stakeholder people that I feel affiliated with is that this is the time that we are using to ramp up. We are not ready to do all that stuff that was suggested because the time is too short. The interns, I mean, maybe there's going to be interns, but if you're volunteering or getting an intern for a site, you've got to train them. We need to be doing that before the summer season opens. And having, and myself, as you know, I am a docent at a museum. That takes time. It's not going to happen between now and when summer starts. So many of us are looking at this period as getting ourselves ready. And I think if we had talked about this last fall, we could have spent September to December or December to the winter getting ourselves closer to being ready. So
we did talk about it last fall.
So that's all I'm going to say from my perspective. Commissioner Murrow, you had an interesting CIC meeting.
Yes, we did a tour of the of this facility.
I heard the tour guide was amazing.
Yes, and so we had a good time with that in lieu of our regular meeting, but we still had the opportunity to hear from the neighborhood association members on what's going on in their neighborhood. The only other thing that I would add is apparently there was a C4 meeting last week. I was not added to the list, and I was not made aware of when they were meeting until Commissioner Savas called me the next day and said, "Where the heck were you?" So
don't
I
know
did.
about it, you can't
I
go.
did email Trent Wilson, who I know from being on the C4 subcommittee for the tolling, and so now we should have that squared away, and hopefully next time I will have an update.
Yeah. Well, I jumped right into the fire with the Metro Policy Advisory Committee right after our last commission meeting, and it was all about the climate action plan. And I will say that myself and City Councilor Brent Sherman from Happy Valley had a lot to say about it. I haven't read all the material, but I read the summary documents. And all I told them was, Brent Sherman made this statement, which I think is apt to all of us, is that parking and all the things we're going to do with the RTP works really great if you happen to live in Portland. But if you live in the outlying area where your hub and your transportation all has to go into downtown Portland before you go anywhere else, and he relayed how taking a bus from a certain place in Happy Valley took 2 hours to get to downtown Portland, whereas if you drove it, it was a half an hour. And that, I could see staff nodding, but there still is the whole issue of this next thing coming down on us. I said, we haven't even finished the housing stuff, and now you're asking us to do something else, and there's money we have to compete with other jurisdictions. I said, you need to like slow your roll. That was what I said. I said, it's too much right now. We can't take this on. We can get extensions, but it was a little discouraging. I still have to get back to the staff person when I finish reading this other document that I have. We don't have anything on K or J because we're moving towards 2040 and the Willamette Falls locks. We should probably just take that off of there because that's not going to happen anymore. You did L. Our M is we're going to have the meeting to meet with the city of West Lynn. Again, I was the one that proposed this. It was picked up by West Lynn city councilors, at least 3 of them. I had an opportunity to talk to Mayor Walters. And I will have to work with Tony further and John Williams to talk about sort of the format that is in our heads, that we would like to see this be somewhat informal. I'm not looking for us to come up with a super decision that night, but we need to come to some agreement about what we feel are the real challenges. And to give you an example, as you already know, so the option that's closest to the falls on the south side, the big hang up there is all that property on the other side is in private hands. The property on our side is in private hands. And we don't know what PGE is planning to do. We don't know what the West Lynn Paper Company is planning to do. So, I mean, that's a challenge. We have some challenges on the other side too, but we haven't had a chance to sort of talk to each other about how comfortable we feel about adding these to our TSP. Maybe we'll put both options, and maybe that's what we do. We put both options, but we have not had that opportunity to talk to each other. Commissioner Smith, you had indicated on item G, the Clackamas Water Environmental Services, that you would like to be taken off of that, so I guess I will appoint myself to it, if that's possible. I don't know, can I appoint myself to it?
Sure.
Can I volunteer myself
I'm sure
for it?
someone will tell you can if you can't.
Yeah, okay, well,
So far, no one's saying that.
I'll volunteer to take your place on that committee. I've already received notification on item N from the manager of the South Fork Water Board, and I was kind of scared, to be honest with you, because he said, oh, I've got lots of stuff for you to do, and I thought, oh, no. So,
Is that meeting on May 25th?
Yes, it is. It's just before I have my MPAC meeting, so it's just like former Mayor Lyle Smith. I have that from 5 to 7, and then I have South Fork Water Board from 7 until whatever. So I will just grind away at it and be there. It's online, so I will be at home, and if I need to turn my camera off and wander away in my house, I will do that. Willamette Falls and Heritage Landings, we had a meeting we have our meeting next week, but we had an open house at the Old Oregon Photos Studio. The late John Klatt has donated his business and collection to Willamette Falls Heritage and Landing, so they were having an open house, and I picked up a whole bunch of really awesome Oregon City photographs and did some greeting of people that wandered by. So they plan to move into the old West Lynn City Hall when that gets going, but The collection that Mr. Klatt has is incredible. There were some pictures I hadn't even seen before that didn't come from Clackamas County Museum. These were new things. So, and of course I picked up a new picture of Willamette Falls for my extensive collection. Anything else, gentlemen? All right. Being no further business, may I call the meeting adjourned?
Please.
All right. Thank you.